Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. It's all about bean counters. That's who matters in this economy now. Stacy?
Yeah, because when you look at different economies, it's who is counted and who doesn't count. Because if workers, for example, or the bottom 99% don't count, then they don't get counted. And so we're going to look at two different headlines and show what it means, the difference between those who are counted and those who are not counted. Well, in Europe, let's look there first, because this is a topic that is dear to my heart, and that is toilet paper. Who pays for the toilet paper? The big questions of the work from home era. As the world convulses in crisis and tens of millions of us dig in for the long haul of working from home, one question looms large. Who pays for the tea and toilet paper? The answer, according to the Dutch, is your bosses. And how much? About €2 or $2.40 per working day on average.
This is interesting. The lockdown has shifted the way people relationship with their bosses and their companies and how to account for costs, and down to the granularity of toilet paper. And the only industry I know where toilet paper costs are incorporated in the P&L on a monthly or weekly basis is in the prison business, right? In prison, people are very parsimonious with their toilet paper, and it's all accounted for due to the nature of that industry. So this is what coronavirus has done, is it's created this prison planet type of situation.
Certainly, the workers in the Netherlands, 80% of them are basically part of organized labor. They have collective bargaining. So this is what they're fighting over, is €2 a day for toilet paper that they now have to buy at home that they used to use at the office. And this is apparently considered a right. Across the rest of Europe, we see Spain has obliged employers to pay for home office maintenance and equipment. Germany is debating a bill enshrining remote workers' rights. France has passed a law shielding them from after-hours email, of course, while Britain has hinted that it may relax the rules on tax deductions for work-related equipment purchased during the pandemic. Of course, we just passed a tax bill, a huge one last year here in America, and that got rid of that tax deduction for things you have to buy from home for work that is not reimbursed from your office, like as an employee. So if we're seeing that in America with a lot of teachers, they have to buy equipment for their Zoom meetings, and that's no longer tax deductible because their offices, their job is not buying it for them. They have to buy it, but they can't deduct it from their taxes.
Right. This is never going back to the way business was.
No.
People are now just totally shifting their entire outlook and approach to work and the relationship with the company or the institution, whether it's the school, working remotely or working at home. People are building their home studios and their home offices, and they're using online media, and we're not going to go back. This is the beginning of a new era, and this is something that it's going to look nostalgically to the era of the office and the water cooler and having lunch with your friends at work and all that. That's all apparently never going to come back, I don't think.
No, it's over. And that's why they're enshrining these rights in Europe right now. The workers there are like on top of things, right? They immediately see their life is changing and they're making sure they get rights. Here, we don't know. It's hard to count anything or anybody. We don't know what is here. And we are seeing some of the signs, like, for example, we've covered the fact that savings rate is at an all-time high. Household wealth is allegedly at an all-time high in America. And yet you read a headline like this, 10% of adults did not have enough to eat in the previous 7 days. Census Bureau stats show an increasing number of people are struggling with rent, food, and job losses due to COVID. So this was the Census Bureau Household Pulse Survey. And I guess they looked at 249.2 million American adults, and they found that 134.2 million had enough food of the right type. 63.8 million had enough food, not necessarily the right type. 17.3 million sometimes did not have enough to eat. 4.9 million often did not have enough to eat, and 29 million did not report.
The granularity of just trying to have minimum calorie intake per capita to keep workers alive, to click on ads from their casino gulag hovels, of which they may or may not have to pay for their own toilet paper. The corporation, of course, has artificial intelligence tools and data, big data as it's called, to maximize their yield. The average consumer is on the other end of the artificial intelligence. They're the rats in the cage. They're the mice in the experiment that AI is observing to develop how to get greatest yield from them without killing the mice or the people. And that trend is exacerbating, of course. We see it quite strenuously being deployed in Asia, but it's coming to America and Canada and all these other countries in Europe as well.
It's also the difference you're seeing between the U.S. and America, Europe and America, where in Europe, they're essentially on a dollar standard, right? They can't print the dollars, but they are on a dollar standard because most world trade is in the reserve currency. So they don't have a reserve currency. They have a semi-reserve currency, but they have to, like nickel and dime, they have to count down to the nearest penny. So that's why they're looking at sheets of toilet paper, how much you use per day and how much you get reimbursed for it. Whereas here we just spray the entire economy with cash, like free money for all. We're bailing out European banks, Latin American economies and stuff like that. So we could do that. But there's the distribution itself, because our infrastructure is so rickety, especially the banking infrastructure is just really rickety here. And so it's not getting to these people. And I'm assuming that some of them are undocumented, and so they can't access some of the free money spewing all over the place. So we're going to look at where it is like actually doing okay for small and medium-sized enterprises versus large enterprises. And that is this headline from wolfstreet.com. Twisted bailout economy, Chapter 11 bankruptcies surged, but commercial Chapter 13 bankruptcies plunged. 420,000 small businesses closed quietly, highest rate ever. So the Chapter 11 bankruptcies, which are like restructuring, you're going to continue as an entity. Those are from the larger multinational, the bigger corporations, and those surged. Whereas the Chapter 13, which are smaller businesses, those have hit an all-time low. I mean, the chart is pretty amazing on that. And the Chapter 13 bankruptcy filings plunged to below 2006 levels. And then we have also the Chapter 7 bankruptcies. So those are plunging because they got $550 billion with the PPP, the Payment Protection Purchasing Act, whatever. You know, the one that spewed $550 billion. A lot of it went to fraudulent companies, and you're seeing people get arrested for that. But it did help some of those. But you're seeing the increase in bankruptcies of the Chapter 11, like all those fracking companies and all the retail companies.
The system is broken. And in America, they round up to the nearest trillion.
Yeah.
Remember during the 2008 crisis, originally they were going to ask for $1 trillion from Congress, but the wisdom of Hank Paulson at the time said that psychologically that sounded big. So they went and they asked for $800 billion.
Yeah.
So 200 billion here or there, you know, eventually it adds up and it's real money, right? But so this reserve currency is literally sprayed around like out of a fire hydrant, and trillions of it. And whether it's Chapter 13, Chapter 7, or Chapter 11, there doesn't seem to be any end to the chapters of this story in terms of money printing. It's the never-ending novella of print more.
There are signs that it is actually getting to smaller and medium-sized enterprises versus the big guns, versus the people with access to the Fed and the Fed's free money. And so you are seeing signs that it is getting to some of the smaller groups of people. There, in fact, the consumer bankruptcies are down 36% in September on last year. So
to what extent are these small to medium-sized enterprises now becoming zombie companies? In other words,
Exactly.
the zombie companies, that's a huge problem in the S&P 500, in the banking industry.
Yeah.
They live on bailouts, and they, in fact, don't have a viable underlying business. So they're taking that busted model and they're applying it to small, medium-sized enterprises. So every dry cleaner and falafel shop in America, not Canada, is going to be living on PPE loans coming from the government, on the money printer go burr, and you got a nation of zombies. That's why pop culture has given us all these zombie films and zombie TV shows to prepare us for the zombie apocalypse.
there is indeed a bit of a trickle-down zombification that could be happening here, and everybody gets to be a zombie. But it does show as well, the data shows that we've also seen a record closing, not bankruptcies, of small and medium-sized enterprises. So these are people that chose to just close their business and not apply for these PPP loans, or maybe they didn't get one of these PPP loans, because remember, JP Morgan and the big banks got most of the money and they gave it to their favorite customers.
Well, they couldn't compete with the company
Sure.
that's
The zombie.
getting the free money.
You can't
So
compete with a zombie.
That's how zombies take over. It's, obviously, they're very slow moving.
Yes.
So you think you could, outrun them and beat them, but that's not the way zombies succeed. They succeed through cash infusions from the government.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. All this data is showing a very varied picture, and it gets blurred by the amount of spew of paper dollars being sprayed at the economy, and it doesn't necessarily rescue the bits of the economy that you want rescued.
No, it's malinvestment. That's what we would say in, let's say, the Austrian school, for example, that when you just willy-nilly money printer go burr and you give it to the best zombies, you end up with a dysfunctional zombie apocalypse.
It doesn't seem to have stopped the spread of COVID, as like it's the entire White House has COVID-19 now, and it's like, for what? Like all of this entire
look
shutdown.
at the zombie, shows. They don't look healthy, right? They're all got eyeballs pouring out of their heads and skin popping off, and they're missing an arm or a leg or whatever, right? That's COVID.
So that's what they say. Wasn't it H.L. Mencken who said something like, "You always get the president you deserve in a democracy"?
You're darn tootin'.
So his eyes roid rage.
Huge. I mean, I've been saying this for 4 years. America is as American as apple pie, hot dogs, baseball,
And roid rage.
and lawsuits. Gee whiz, we've sorted that out quick. Well, we got to take a break. And when we come back, speaking of small to medium-sized enterprises, the most charming, successful tahini shop and Middle Eastern food in Canada. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to go to Ali Hamam. He is the founder of Tahini's Restaurants, a chain of self-described, quote, best Middle Eastern restaurants in the world out of London, Ontario, Canada. He's got a very interesting story about inflation, wealth confiscation through currency devaluation, and Bitcoin. It's a great story and great food. Ali, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
You've got an interesting story. So let's start with you fleeing Egypt after the so-called Arab Spring. Now, Keiser Report was there just 2 or 3 weeks after the Mubarak was overthrown. We did some shows in Cairo. So lay out the scene for those too young to remember what happened. Tell us how the wealth confiscation happened, Ali.
We grew up in Egypt, and my father was working in Saudi Arabia as a math professor. And we were kind of back and forth between both countries, but I got my higher education from Egypt. And then 2011 came, and we witnessed the Egyptian Revolution, and it was a spectacular event. We were honored to be a part of that revolution, and we saw the whole country stand up against the president back then, and we overthrew him. And then the same year, we decided to leave Egypt and move to Canada, because that's where my father originally got his PhD. So we're all dual citizens. And we decided to move, but we were faced with a big problem of my father moving his wealth from Egypt to Canada. And the banks pretty much froze all outcoming capital coming out of the country, and you can only move like $1,000 per month, something ridiculous like that. So which forced my father to work an extra 6 years in Saudi to kind of fund his retirement, fund his new home that they have here in Canada. And we were faced with strict capital controls on their money, and it was a wake-up call. During that time, from 2012 to 2017, where things got a little bit easier to move money around, we all witnessed the Egyptian pound drop 65% against the US dollar, which was devastating, but we saw it happening year over year. And in the span of 5 years, my parents saw a lot of their wealth just evaporate into thin air.
As I recall, and as I mentioned, the Keiser Report was in Cairo shortly there after the so-called Arab Spring and the revolution. I remember at the time, the feeling was euphoric. And also this idea, they called it the Facebook revolution because through social media, the generation, in particular women, and the whole thing kicked off with a protest, a women's protest against some police brutality, I believe. And this was, at the one hand, it was euphoric and it was social media. And as we outsmarted Mubarak and we took over, but in a very short order of time, the euphoria faded and a harder reality came in. And you became sensitized to banks, currency devaluation, and everything that a lot of people all over the world are experiencing. And we see similar events in Lebanon, Argentina, Venezuela. Do you think that Westerners in places like Europe, Canada, and the US are too lackadaisical about thinking that something like that couldn't happen here?
They're not the same countries like the Western countries and countries in the Middle East and Asia and so forth. But we know where that road leads, right? We're not saying it's going to happen tomorrow or next year or whatever, but eventually with that same monetary system in place, we know what that looks like. And that's not something that I would be comfortable taking my family through. And we want to tell people about that. And we want to tell people that, hey, there's another option, and Bitcoin provides that option because it gives you that freedom to say, you know what, I don't care what happens to countries, what happens to currencies. I'm safe. My family's safe. I can focus on our health, our job, our careers, and so on. So I have peace of mind in that. And yes, as much as the Egyptian revolution was something euphoric, we were part of that. I can tell you, Max, like you've seen it. You've seen how, like when you're in the streets, you look to your right, you can see people as far as your eye can see. You look to your left, and it's the same thing. And it's all nice and dandy, but when it comes to your wealth, that is getting affected by those type of events.
I remember in Tahini Square, it was crazy times, mob scenes. But what was interesting is, though, my observation was that the police were effectively not on the street. The police were nowhere to be seen. But yet people came together and they functioned in a chaotic way, but they still managed to find a consensus, if you will, amongst the people who were clinging to this newfound freedom, and it was working as a way. I remember at the hotel talking to somebody who said he, for the first time in his life as an Egyptian, felt this sense in his heart of being free, and you could just tell he was completely elated. And it just seems that you've carried the torch of this freedom with your Bitcoin and the way you carry Bitcoin. And your restaurant chain was really a trendsetter and did something remarkable, some might say, is that you put a big portion of your cash into Bitcoin as a safe haven, as a reserve currency, and something that Michael Saylor over at MicroStrategy has gotten a lot of attention for. I believe you actually made this move ahead of Michael Saylor, correct?
Actually, no, we did it right after Michael Saylor announced it, right before we were all Bitcoiners in the company. And we already had a few meetings about moving the company's reserves into Bitcoin. And as soon as we saw Michael Saylor announce that, we were like, that pushed us over the edge. And we realized that, okay, it's game on. This is going to be a race of accumulation. We think that all corporations are eventually going to be acquiring Bitcoin at some point. And we just said, hey, we're going to do it first.
Right. So that was the kind of the spark that got you guys off the fence. And it's like, hey, we're going to put our portion of our reserves into Bitcoin. I got to ask you, I watch your videos on YouTube every day, right from Tahini's restaurant, where you're preparing Middle Eastern food, which I love. And, I got to tell you, you seem to be doing very well these days in terms of keeping the company going, keeping the spirit going. You opened up some franchise. And I see that with COVID around the world, this is not always the case. What's your secret?
Our secret in our business is just good food and good customer service. And it comes down to that. We really focus on making the best Middle Eastern food out there. And we have meetings every day and every week on how we can make it even better. So I think that, our focus on quality is the kind of the secret recipe behind our business model. And also our profitability, which gave reason for all of these franchisees to come join us and open Tahini's franchisees themselves.
Now, do you communicate to customers about Bitcoin? Do you take Bitcoin? Is there a Bitcoin message in the restaurant or on that level?
So not really. We made it public through our Twitter account, and our franchisees and our customers can see that as well. But we made it clear that, we did go on a Bitcoin standard, but we will continue doing our transactions and purchases in fiat because that's just the efficient way to do it. That's what most people do it. And we don't think, I personally don't think that Bitcoin is a payments technology. I think we have better things to do that. It's a savings technology, right? And that's what I think people should view it as. So as soon as we announced it, we got all these messages hey, do you take Bitcoin payments, Lightning payments? Guys, do not spend your Bitcoin, right? Pay us in fiat. We'll buy Bitcoin with it. But I don't think it's made to be spent that way.
Well, the customer's always right. And if the customer's demanding that they can pay in Bitcoin, you got to listen to your customer. That's your customer-centric enterprise. That's what's made you the greatest Middle Eastern food in the world. And, driving this whole movement in Canada is customer appreciation. So also drone technology. I see Amazon and these other companies are getting into drone. When can I order a falafel by drone?
Hey, Max, I told you this before. If you ever want a Tahini's meal, let me know. I will FedEx it to you anytime you want. You don't have to worry about that.
No, now we're talking. That's the kind of thing I like. So it's Bitcoin, it's Middle Eastern cuisine. You're in Canada. Canada is a little different climate than Egypt, a little colder. And have you become an ice hockey fan?
Not really, actually. I've tried to watch it, and I can never keep my eye on the puck, so I know Canadians are going to get upset about that, but I'll stick with making food and focusing on that. And hockey's not for me though.
It seems as though Bitcoin resonates with you on a much deeper level. Is that true?
Yes, Max. So I actually want to send a message to everybody that's watching your show, and I want to tell them that our move into Bitcoin wasn't just an investment. It was our savings policy, okay? And we struggle, and I think a lot of communities struggle with this around the world where, and I'm also going to speak for the Muslim community, for example, right? I don't know if you knew this about the Muslim community, Max, but in our religious teachings, we're not, it's against our religion teachings to use interest and to live in a debt economy, all right? But we're faced with that our whole lives because that's what the whole world runs on, right? So we also have a situation where you have inflation at a rate of 10 to 20%. It's not the 2% that everybody talks about. It's actually 10 to 20%. And for people to really understand that, right, they need to understand that their retirement is running away from them at a 10 to 20% per year, which means if you want to keep up, you need to earn an extra 20% every year just to retire, right? So what are people's options? Option number one is stick with their principles and try to save in cash and be poor for the rest of their lives, right? That's not a good option. Option number two is forget your principles, embrace the debt economy, right? Load up on debt, and then spend the rest of your life paying off these debts, and then still not have enough to retire at the end. Okay, so that's not a good option. And then option three is somehow figure out the stock market, become a financial like expert, and buy all the Apples and Amazons and the Googles right when they start, and try to get it all right. Good luck with that, right? That's not going to happen.
All right, got to cut her off there. Thanks for being on Keiser Report, Ali Hamam of Tahini's Restaurant.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Ali Hamam of Tahini's Restaurant up there in Canada. If you'd like to get in touch with us, please do so. Until next time, bye, y'all.